welcome back to the channel. This morning we're working on the Nissan Note again. It's due its MOT, and as per usual with cars, because the MOT is due, it's decided to break something. We've had a bit of a clunking noise from the front of the car for a while. I never really could work out what it was, or it was a drive shaft on its way out. Anyway, it made a very large noise this week, and when I took the wheel off I found a pigtail of spring left at the bottom on the cup here where the spring sits. So this spring is broken. Now this is the last spring on the car. I've changed the 3 others, so we're going to have to take this out and swap it. It is relatively easy to do, and I'll take you through it step by step. First thing that we need to do obviously is get the wheel off, get the car jacked up safely on an axle stand, and then we'll get the wheel out of the way, and then I'll show you what we need to do to get the spring out. Okay, so we've got the axle stand under the car. There's a little V-shaped piece of metal under the sill here, which is your jacking point. I've got an axle stand with one of these little rubber V-mount cushioning rubbers, I suppose you'd call it, to protect the actual metal piece on the sill so you don't damage it. Held on there, and I've left the jack in place. It's got a piece of wood onto a bit of the structure underneath the car to lift it up, because I obviously can't lift it up with the jacking point because that's where I want to put this axle stand. Right, so she's up in the air, wheel off, and on to the next part. Right, the wheel's off, on to business. So obviously this is where the spring is. Paint's coming off already, that didn't last very long. Unfortunately, parts nowadays aren't made as good as they used to be. I know I sound like an old fart, but it's just the truth. Sits in this cup. There's the shaft of the McPherson strut. Now the brake line to the caliper sits on a little tab which is attached to this, and there's a spring metal clip which we'll have to remove that. That'll then come loose away from the strut. There is the ABS sensor cable, which again is just on 2 rubber grommets, so you one either side. We'll need to take those away, and then literally all you've got are these 2 big bolts holding the hub on, and you'll notice my push rod here that connects to the anti-roll bar is new because one of these failed. So we need to undo that and get that away, that side or that side. I found in the past sometimes one end is easier than the other. This is pretty much brand new, so we should be okay. There is an Allen key socket in the end of these so you can actually turn the nut without the shaft turning. Because it's a ball joint, it will want to just spin, but you can put an Allen key in there to turn the nut, so I need to take that off as well. So I'll remove all these and then come back and show you just before we take the hub off. So this is what I meant before. So the Allen key goes in the end of the thread, and then you can get your spanner, which is on, in this case, the 17mm, and you can see how the Allen key wants to turn. That's the thread wanting to turn because it's a ball joint, so there's nothing really holding it in place on the back here. Because obviously it's a ball joint, it needs to move. So you need to hold the Allen key and then turn the spanner, and then you can get the nut off. Okay, so the nut's now off. You can see the thread's pointing down a little bit at the minute, because obviously there's a pressure from the anti-roll bar is pressing on it. Now on the other side, I've managed to get the spring clip. You can see that it's got a bend in it to give it some spring. Now you have to put a screwdriver in that little ledge in the bottom there, where it's bent, and just tap it off like that. So it is a bit awkward, but you can get in. What you do then is push the brake cable in, or brake pipe in, and then it will come out because there's a big metal ferrule on it. And when you put this back on, push it in like that, pull that out, and there's enough room, there's like a little slot in that metal thing for you to push the clip back up, and then it holds it in place. So the clip, where my tip of my finger is, there's that little metal, there's a gap there, look, and the clip goes there. It's pretty obvious once you see it. So that comes off. So that's out of the way. We've got the ABS sensor that just pushes into a little clip either side with a rubber grommet. So now we need to undo these 2 bolts here which hold the hub on, and then there's 3 up the top that hold the strut into the wing. But we'll get these loosened off first. These are quite rusty. I really could do with replacing these. I haven't got time at the minute, but I'll order some and then swap them when they come. Right, so that gets these loosened and then we'll look at the top. Right, we've broken out the big guns now. I've recently bought myself this new Hilker, sorry it's upside down, socket set. Looks quite good to me. It's got lots of long reach sockets, Torx sockets, screwdriver bits, lots of extensions, and then on this side it's got all the ratchets. It goes right up to a 32, and you've got lots of bits again, spark plug sockets. It's really quite comprehensive, looks really good quality. It's button release socket as well, so if you put a socket on there it won't come off until you press the button on the back. This was about 85 quid delivered from Amazon. I was originally looking at the Halford sets, which maybe got slightly more sockets than this. I don't think there's many more, but they're like 175, 220 pound. I mean, they are guaranteed for life, mainly because they're made by Snap-on. They've got Halford written on them, but Snap-on make them. But for me, for less than half the price, this looked like a really good option for me. You know, all the sockets are really nicely finished off. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding, but it looks good to me. So right, we're going to use these to get these sockets off, which look to be about between, I seem to remember they're weird sizes, so one size on the nut and another size on the bolt, in the area of like 16 to 18 mil, but I'll investigate and let you know in a minute. Okay, they're undone now. It turned out it's a 16 on this side. I think it's a 17 on this side, but the nuts on this car are a bit rusty. So I couldn't really, I mean, I had a go at cleaning them up. But an 18 fitted really nicely, and then I gave it a dose of the, if I can find it, I gave it a dose of the old impact driver, and that top one spun right off. The bottom one, I ended up putting the torque wrench on because it's nice and long to give you some leverage, and that's come undone. I'm going to clean these up. When I get these out of the car, I'll get the wire brush on and clean them up. But they're done up to about 80 pounds-feet, foot-pounds, can never remember which way around it is, but around 80, 85, because obviously it's holding the wheel onto the car. Now what we need to do now is inspecting under the bonnet, and there's 3 nuts for us to undo that holds the whole shebang into the wing. So we'll have a look at what size they are. Right, as I suspected when I looked at them, they're 13 mil. I've got 13 mil socket here, and yeah, that fits nice and snugly. There is the pain of having this in the way, but Nissan put a little escape hatch here for you. There's a little rubber trap door, so you can get extension with a socket on through there to get that back one done. These front ones I'll probably have to get with the ratchet spanners, but I'll loosen them 3 off. Right, first issue of the day. I've got this one loose, I've got this one loose. What you might find is they don't come up, because what's actually happening is the strut is falling down, so they stay in place and the strut is getting lower. So you need to be careful that you don't undo them all and the strut then falls out and you bash the disc on the floor. Now there is a little trapdoor here. You can't really see in there to get to anything, and the added brilliant design feature is that the back here is the metal bulkhead, which is on the wrong side of where you need to be. Now, people commented on the last video that I took some of this off to be able to see what I was doing. And they said, oh, you can use the trapdoor. You can open the trapdoor. You can't see the nut. God knows how you're going to put it back in, because you can't see to put it in the hole. So I'm going to maybe slightly dismantle this side of the scuttle here to get that out of the way, so I can actually see where the nut is. Well, as usual, the smallest thing causes the most issues. So, trying to get the scuttle off, you obviously need to take the windscreen wipers off. What they have is they have a little plate on the top, which you can flick off with a screwdriver. Then you undo this nut, 14mm nut, and if you waggle the arm, it's like a taper on there, so if you have to waggle it and it'll come off. I just put the nut back on so I don't lose it. So I've taken both of those off. Then to get this off, there is a little tiny Phillips in a rubber washer thing here. It seems very strange. And then underneath here, between the scuttle and a piece of metal, which is part of the bulkhead, there are 3 clips. Like this. These are an absolute SOB to get out. So, there's a tab in the middle, top and bottom. And the only way I found to get them out, excuse me while I put me windscreen wiper cover thing down, the only way I found was to get a thin screwdriver. There's the clip, there we go. Push that down and lever up the little tab. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Let me see if I can get the light to shine through it. There you go. Look, can you see there's 2 little teeth? One on the top one and one on the bottom one. And they're right near the back. So these plastic levers, which are 14 years old, which you don't really want to bend, because guess what will happen if you do? But you've got no choice really. You lever that up. Try and use these flat bits with your finger to pull it forward slightly. It will then kind of go to one side, and then lever the bottom one off and the clip will come off really quick. Try not to drop it in the engine bay. And there's 3 of those. There's one about there, one in the middle and one the other side, roughly the same distance as this one. Now hopefully the scuttle will come away enough so I can see that nut clearly. Well, first of all, I was wrong. There was 5 good God, 5 clips instead of 3, but the scuttle's now away. And I've managed, let me show you, I've managed to get the first bolt out. So I'll rest the scuttle back where it ought to be. And before I take these 2 out, I'm going to take the hub off, because that weighs a ton. And obviously, if you undo these, the whole bloody lot will just fall out. Okay, right, to preempt things, I've got, you won't believe what this is if I tell you. This is bagged up bricks and a wooden block, and that's to hold the weight of the hub. Hub sits in there. It takes the pressure off the brake line and also off the drive shaft. You don't want the hub to just flop on the ground. That's not good for any of it. I've managed to get the ball joint end out of the anti-roll bar out of there. As you can see, this is loose now because it's only held on by those 2 bolts at the top. So I have to be a bit careful now. I'm going to take 1 bolt out and then I'll take the last one out while holding this. And once this is out, we're on to the next stage. Now you can see where the tail end was. It's supposed to be in that plastic sleeve there. Right, so we'll take this out and then it's on to spring compression and swapping and all lots of exciting things. Well, it's out. And you can see at the bottom here, that's the bit that protects the end of the spring. And the spring isn't sat correctly in the cup here. It's all over to one side. Look, it should be here, because it's not long enough. So what we need to do now is we need to compress what's left of the spring, and on these you take this top nut off, and again it's got a hex thingy in the top, and I remember I bought a special socket with a hex key in. Thankfully my new set has already got them. This one I seem to think is 18 or 19 mil, and I didn't have a spanner, so I got like the nearest spanner and it was strong enough to just hold it in place while we undid this. And we have to spin the nut off, then this top mount will come off, and then the spring will come out. Now we need to compress the spring even though it's shorter, because these things are very dangerous. If one of them releases, it'll take your head off. So I'll go get some more tools, we'll compress the spring, and then we'll try and get this nut off. One thing I'm going to do is, you can see where the hub bolts on there. We need to take note of the orientation of this top piece, because obviously that's to do with the lining up. I think this spins anyway. Yeah, I don't actually know. Now I think about it, I don't think it's an issue because it spins. So we should be okay. So we'll just take that off. Rightio. So this is the spring compressor. It's the type I've got anyway. So it's got a big nut on the end, which I think is a 21. It's got a claw at one end, which is free to slide up and down as it likes, and then a claw at the bottom that's got a thread in it. So as you tighten that, it brings the claws together, and if the spring's in there, it squashes the spring as well. So we've got it on the spring, hook round there, hook round the top. Now I've got an impact driver now because I'm lucky, and I'm going to stick a socket on there and give it the old impact driver, because this takes forever. If you use even if you've got a ratchet spanner, this will take ages. You know, 1/2 turn on this, you got to pull this all the way down here. Yeah, I don't know if you maybe get a drill with a socket adapter on, that would be much better. But yeah, this is tough work with a spanner. Right, I'm going to compress this and then we'll look at the top mount. Right, spring's out, and you can see where it snapped. Metal fatigue, I would imagine. They always seem to go at the bottom, and this was a beast to get off. It's obviously had some kind of Loctite on from the factory, and it was 1/8 of a turn with the spanner all the way off. Really tough. The other one was nowhere near as bad as this, but hey ho. So what we need to do now is, there is actually a rubber ring that goes at the top of the spring under the top mount, so we need to sling that in the bin. We've got a new one, so I'll need to compress that to get it in, because it's now actually half a link longer than the other one, and stick it all on here and do that nut back up. Wish me luck. Okay, you join me after quite a bit of faffing about. So what's happened now is I've got 2 spring compressors on the new spring, because it's quite a bit springier and longer than the old one, and I need enough room to get all this top mount on and get that nut on and tightened. The bottom of the spring has this little plastic sleeve on it to protect it, and it also sits up against a little metal tab on the base. Now I won't worry too much about this, because you can rotate all this afterwards to get it in the right place, but better to get it right first time. I've rotated that round, everything's where it ought to be. We've now just got the job of putting the Allen key in there and tightening this up as tight as we can. And then unfortunately I don't know whether or not I'll be able to get my impact gun on these to undo them. If I can't, I'll just have to spanner them off. It just takes forever. Okay, right, on with the nut. Right, the new spring is in. Whew, that was hard work getting them off. Now if you put 2 spring compressors on, always remember, well, my advice would be, when you're undoing them, pick the hardest one to get to with your spanner first. Because the other spring compressor is taking some of the tension, the first one you take off will always be easier to undo, because the spring is shorter. As soon as you take that one off, all the pressure is on the one that's remaining, so it'll be really tight, and if that's in an awkward place to undo, like, you know, like the nut is a bit inaccessible, it's going to be a right pain for you to get that undone. So that took me probably 10-11 minutes to get them off. Felt like a lot more. Now all we need to do is go backwards in the other direction. So this goes up into the wing. We stick the 3 bolts in temporarily, just loose. We then stick the hub on, and then we just have to reattach all the detritus, like the brake pipe and the ABS doodads. Yeah, so let's do that. Right, I've got it loosely in the top of the inner wing. Now, what I looked at was, on the top mount here, there's a big raised rubber nodger on one side. That faces into the engine bay. I've checked the other side and it's the same, so the nodger on the other side is the other way around, so it's on that side, but still facing into the engine bay. Then the holes will magically appear. And when you're tightening these up, kind of look for where the nut was before. You'll be able to see it in the paint. So if you can get them roughly where they were before, that helps alignment. It won't be miles, well, it probably won't be out at all. I've had both these suspensions completely to pieces before, all back together again. I had it alignment checked and it was absolutely spot on, which was, I don't know if that's a miracle or what. Anyway, got to tighten these up now, and then we'll move downstairs to the hub. Okay, so the nuts are all tight. Scuttle's back on. With the rubber bit, there's just got 2 plastic things that push into the scuttle. we need to put the 5 clips on. I've put the washer, the wiper blades back on, put the nuts on. I need to tighten them up and put the covers on, and then we're all done under the bonnet then, and we need to fasten the hub back on to the end of the strut. Right, that was a struggle. So the hub's back in now. I think the lesson I learnt there was don't tighten up the top bolts until you've got the hub in, because it restricts the amount of movement you've got. And also, having to have that in, I really won't want to put that in afterwards, because the tension on the arm is quite big. So at least get it in with the nut on, even if it's not tight first. Tighten it up afterwards. These two are in. I've torqued them up to about 85 foot-pounds. That's plenty. The ABS cable is in, and the brake pipe, you just push the clip onto the metal ferrule, then just tap it up with a hammer till it goes home, and that's kind of it. So I just had to put the wheel back on and we're good for MOT. Right, I don't think I've got anything else to tell you. Yeah, this can be a bit of a tough job to get in unless you've got maximum wiggleability on this. I did have to turn the wheel slightly because that's the way the hub was pointing, and I did manage to get it in. And then you can kind of put a screwdriver through the holes to line up one bolt while you put the other one in, so you can move it about a bit. But yeah, not too hard. Right, and we're done. Wheels back on, all torqued back up. Hope this was helpful to you. If you need to do this, these springs do seem to snap, especially these modern replacement ones, seem to snap quite often. So if you need to do this, this should show you how you could do it yourself and save yourself some money. You don't need to go to the garage, as long as you've got some basic DIY tools, of course. Well, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that other stuff YouTube wants you to do, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.